So I'll continue our presentation. And I want to tell you something more about the national level we also participate in. But first, this is one of the examples Ilse does in trainings at our court. And what I think she forgot to mention is that many of the court communication officers, they exchange ideas about the different trainings they give. So you don't always want to repeat the same training. Sometimes it's always good to have some change. And so they exchange ideas and give different trainings at different times. What Ilse mentioned just shortly is that one of the things our communication department also does is make small, short summaries in clear language, especially on high-profile cases or in cases where we know that the public or the press is interested in, so that they are able to read in just one short notice what the case is about and what the judgment is. These summaries are sometimes used for the oral pronunciations of the verdicts, and we publish all these summaries on our internet so that everyone can read them at the time they want to read it. As I said, other courts do different things, and one of the interesting things the Court of Amsterdam is a project that is called What I Actually Mean. The judges and the clerks analyze their judgments together with the communication officers and try to decide, what was I really trying to say in my judgment? What can I do better the next time? Because it is not always easy to use clear language in a judgment. You have to practice, and it's always nice to get feedback. So that's what they do in Amsterdam. And this also makes it possible to analyze the judgment, because sometimes there's just too much information in your judgment. With the way the texting works today, everybody just types along and just produces words, and it's good to look at your judgments once in a while and see if there's not too much information in them, if things are superfluous. Another project that is done in the District Court of Arnhem is a project that's called That's Also Possible. What they do there is they put one judgment on their intranet every month, and all judges and clerks can give their opinion about the judgment, what could be done better, what is excellent, give tips and tricks. So in that way, everyone learns from a certain judgment what they can do better themselves the next time. And that way you take in the comments of your colleagues, and well, it works. It works in Arnhem. Ilse and I are also members of a national working group on clear language. And one of the things we did last year, and we are doing that this year also, is to have a trophy on the use of clear language. All people working in the judiciary last year were asked to nominate a judgment they thought was written in clear language, and they were asked to motivate their choice. And then a jury selected one of the judgments, and these are the winners. And what is important for such a project, I think, is that you have important people in your jury. And and Ilse is one of these important people. No, but I think that's very important to give the trophy the meaning it should have. And we were very lucky last year that the president of our Supreme Court was in the jury. And just today, Ilse received the message that he is willing to be the chair of the jury again next year. Well, we're selecting the judgment this year, and the prize will be made known in January next year. And that's one of the things we do nationally, and that is also a way to learn from each other, because we always think that the way we do it in our court is best, but it is always good to look at what other courts do and see if we can learn from them. Another important thing we are thinking about, and I must say what I saw this morning enthuses me very much, because we are not as far with all the films and movies to put on YouTube as is in Denmark and the European Court, but that is a thing we are thinking about. The trouble is, it costs money, and our council has not allocated that much money for such projects as that, but we are trying to interest them, and maybe after today, this conference, we can get them more enthusiastic about it. I forgot to mention that in the jury is not only the president of our Supreme Court, but also several other judges, some journalists, and some court clerks, and together they decide which judgment is best. And I must say, all the attention we pay to clear language has its effect on our mission, because we had a big case about examination fraud in Rotterdam about two years ago. Examination papers were stolen by students, and they were tried, and the judge in this particular case decided to write his judgment in language that was especially understandable for the youngsters that were tried, that were the defendants. And I don't know what the result was, but what I heard from journalists and people in the audience, they said that was really a great decision to use the language that youngsters are able to understand, because it was a decision about them, and it's good for them to know, and for everyone else in their environment, why the court decided as it did. And the result is actually that more and more of our colleagues, more and more of our judges are enthusiastic about using clear language in their judgment. But, as Ilse said, to be honest, there are still a lot of colleagues who look at our mission with a lack of interest or even with disgust. And we are not always welcomed with open arms when we try to make our mission clear. And maybe you recognize these statements when you talk about clear language in judgment. And one of the things they say is juridical issues are far too complicated for the use of clear language. I don't know, is that something you hear?
Who uses that excuse?
And of course, it's true. You have to get used to write in clear language. If you're used to writing in one way, it's not that easy to start writing in a different way. But if you practice, if you get used to it, you find that it'll be just as easy as writing in the other way. But you have to invest in it. And we try to facilitate that with the trainings that, like Ilse gives. Another thing we quite often hear, it's not the task of a judge to explain if someone doesn't understand his verdict. We have lawyers for that, they're attorneys, others should explain. And I find that always a very strange thing to say, because you want to get your message across. So why would you want to leave it to others to explain what your judgment is about? Another thing we hear quite often is, as a judge, I don't write for the parties, but for the appeal court. We hear this quite often too, and of course, when you write a judgment, you have to keep in mind, for whom am I writing? My personal opinion is that if you write for the parties, for the people for whom the decision is, and you write it in clear language, it's always appeal-proof. It will always meet up to the standards needed, because you give your argumentation and you give your decision, so why would it not be appeal-proof? And this one, actually, I already mentioned. I don't have time to write in clear language, and that's just a way of investing your time. And once you've done it a few times, I've got 5 more minutes, I should be able to make this. Then, once you get used to it, it's just as easy as having always done it in your old style. And as I said, why don't you want to write in clear language? You want to be the director of your own verdict. You want your own message to be understood, and it's far too important to leave that explanation to someone else. And in criminal law, we've been using a technique for several years now to explain better in our judgments what the case was about and what the judgment is and what the argumentation is. And it was, there has been a survey about how the new technique works. And one of the results of the survey was that you can say what the case is about, you can build up your argumentation, but on the other hand, if you don't use clear language, your mission has failed, because people will still not understand what you've written and what you've decided. So clear language at all levels is very important. And of course, this is the title of our presentation, Slow and Steady Wins the Race. Because, of course, you can give a presentation, you can give a training to your colleagues, but if you don't repeat in different ways the necessity of using clear language, people will tend to go back to their old style and find it easier. And as the French would say, frappez toujours. I think that is one of the most important things we learned about clear language, is that just giving one training is not enough. You have to repeat the message, but not all the time with the same words, because then people get bored and don't listen to you anymore. Try different techniques, a training, invite someone, an author, to talk about writing, different things to stimulate people and to keep in mind that they should write in clear language. And one of the things we also found out is that it's very important to have a figurehead that stresses the necessity of clear language, like a president of our Supreme Court, of the president of your own court. And if you have a president that is willing to invest, then you're many steps ahead of many others. And what we also try to do is we cannot always do the work ourselves, and we try to interest other judges, so to spread the word, and we hope that in this way our colleagues, at some time, in 10 years' time, hopefully in 5 years' time, they will all write their judgments in clear language, because, and I think this is very important, also the language of judges should connect and not alienate. And with that, I would like to end. Thank you.